The Battle of Thermopylae was fought in 480 BCE between the Persians and the Greeks led by Sparta under King Leonidas. This battle, sometimes known as the 300, would become an iconic moment for Western civilization all the way up until today. A century later, a man named Philip of Macedon would go on to unite the Greek city-states into the Hellenic League and finally give back to Persia what has been dished to them for so long. The Persians were the globalist empire of the time period. The king of the Persians was known as the King of Kings. For example, Xerxes had titles such as Great King, Pharaoh of Egypt, King of all countries, King of Babylon, King of Kings. And so, a real-life Game of Thrones followed. The last ruler of this line would be Darius III. And just before Philip invaded Persia, he would get murdered, and his son Alexander would take control of the soon-to-be Macedonian Empire. Alexander would be the hegemon of the Hellenic League that his father Philip started, and he would also become the Pharaoh of Egypt, King of Persia, King of Kings, if you will. Alexander's empire would span all the way from India to the Mediterranean. He had plans to go into Rome and into Arabia. In fact, while Alexander was on campaigns in the east, his uncle, also named Alexander, was already invading Italy, and he failed and was killed. After making a treaty with the Romans, he had one successful victory over the Samnites, but was killed by the Lucanians at the Battle of Pandosia. After his death, he was succeeded by Aeacides, the cousin of Alexander, and he would be the first satrap of the Kingdom of Epirus. This would be important for the rise of Rome. When Alexander dies, the empire is divided up and sliced up into satrapies, in the same way that Cyrus had his kingdom laid out. Except at this point in time, there is no King of Kings, if you will. So the Game of Thrones begins at this moment. Before Alexander the Great was even laid to rest, his body was being taken back to Macedon in a giant tomb on wheels, carried by horses and Bacchanals playing flutes and singers and dancers. It was a scene to be held. Aridaeus had the honors of taking Alexander back to Macedon to his mother Olympias, who at this point in time was closest thing you're going to get to a queen of the world. But just as Aridaeus was on his way to get through Turkey, Ptolemy, the savior, son of Lagus, intercepted the tomb and brought it down to Egypt, where he would have Alexander placed with who he thought was the real father of Alexander, which was Nectanebo. This story would be placed in the Alexander romance. Perdiccas, the regent of Babylon, was furious after this, so he went down to fight against Ptolemy for the body of Alexander. But Ptolemy would be the one to defeat Perdiccas. The Diadochi is officially underway. Alexander's generals are now at war. It's time to choose a side. I can do an entire 3 to 4 hour video just in the next 5 years span. But to save time for the topic of this video, I'm going to skip ahead and to let you know that when the dust settles, we end up with Lysimachus in control of Thrace and Phrygia. Antipater died at age 81, was succeeded by Cassander. Cassander would be the one to arrest and murder the mother of Alexander the Great, Olympias. As Antipater grew close to his death in 319, he transferred the regency of Macedon not to Cassander, but to Polyperchon, possibly so not to alarm the other Diadochi through an apparent move towards dynastic ambition. Cassander, however, rejected his father's decision and immediately went to seek support of Antigonus the One-Eyed, the general of Alexander, along with Ptolemy and Lysimachus, to forge the strongest allyship between these four. This would not last long, as Seleucus I had plans of his own to be the next king of kings and control Babylon, and he was extremely successful, defeating battle after battle. The Seleucid Empire would rise and control all of Persia, most of Mesopotamia. Antigonus, who was the satrap of Phrygia, made an attempt to make a new division following the death of Perdiccas by the hands of Ptolemy. The partition Triparadisus was a deal struck in 321 BCE. However, only 2 years later, Antipater was killed and the Second Diadochi War began. Cassander would stand out in these wars as being the most hostile to the memory of Alexander because of what he did to his mother and how he was opposed by the kingdom of Epirus, the last stand of remnant from Philip and Olympias. He would have Alexander IV, Roxana, and all of Alexander's supposed illegitimate sons executed, and lied to Olympias when he said that he would spare her life. He would then move the capital from Pella to Thessalonica, which he named after his wife. It would be the Antagonids who would get the revenge. Demetrius of Macedon, the son of Antigonus the One-Eyed, served as the highest general under both Philip and Alexander. I will be doing an entire video on Demetrius. He would even be worshipped in his lifetime and be given the title of Savior, Soter. He would be the next hegemon of the Hellenic League after Alexander himself because of his success against Cassander, Seleucus, and Lysimachus, who were united to destroy him and his father. These armies met at the Battle of Ipsus in Phrygia in 301 BC. Antigonus was killed, and Demetrius, after sustaining severe losses, retired to Ephesus. Plutarch gives an amazing story about his life, ups and downs, but to make a long story short for this video, by the year 294 BCE, he finally establishes himself on the throne of Macedonia by murdering Alexander V, the son of Cassander, and faced the rebellion, but was able to restore the League of Hellas. This was when finally the dust was settling after the Third Diadochi, later be known by historians as the Kingdoms of the Diadochi or the Hellenistic period, from 275 to 30 BCE, when Augustus would take control and win the Game of Thrones. But the question is, how does somebody from Rome win this Game of Thrones and not somebody from Macedonia?